It's such an interesting, exciting, diverse group of plants. It's no wonder that people get excited about bulbs. And the fall time of the year is a great time to consider planting these hardy bulbs and then making an investment in the future. Many of these bulbs will perform for decades after you plant them. So just quickly, a true bulb, a hardy bulb such as a daffodil, typically planted in the fall. The reason that they're planted in the fall is that many of these bulbs require a period of time for the bulb to establish a root system and to develop the flower inside the bulb. And if you look at that upper picture, you can see a hyacinth bulb that's been split lengthwise, and you can see the primordia for the flower within that bulb. And that primordia requires cool temperatures to develop during the winter so that you will have a nice display in the spring when it begins to flower. And typically somewhere around 12 weeks or so of cool temperatures are required. And that's why we typically plant these bulbs in the fall. They'll then sprout in the spring, they'll blossom. At some point, the foliage dies back and then they go dormant again. Now, just a quick note, always a lot of discussion about what to do with the foliage of hardy bulbs after they're finished flowering. Well, you don't want to remove it. It needs to be maintained as long as it's green, healthy, and photosynthesizing because it's storing strength for the support of that flower during the next cycle. So in other words, those daffodil leaves that remain after flowering in the spring and summer need to be maintained so that they can help build strength in the bulb so you have a nice display in those daffodils the following spring. Now, the hardy spring summer bulbs, it's a very diverse group, lots of lovely, lovely flowers for the garden, but certainly tulips, narcissus, hyacinths, various types of alliums, crocus, and a number of other smaller spring flowering bulbs and lilies are all commonly planted in the fall. I do want to mention some hardy summer and fall flowering bulbs. These include Lycoris, colchicum, fall flowering crocus, and then the sternbergia, which is that yellow flower there in the middle. These bulbs flower later in the summer or even into the fall. And frequently with these types of bulbs, they can be fall planted, but frequently with these types of bulbs, your goal is to catch the period of time between their production of foliage, which is in the spring and summer, and when they flower, which is in the summer and fall. And so these may need to be planted earlier in the fall than a more typical hardy spring flowering bulb. So choose a good site for your hardy bulbs. A good site is well-drained. Keep in mind that you can plant these bulbs under trees, even in areas that will be shady during the summer, because many of them develop their foliage before the canopy of deciduous trees closes in over them. So they're able to utilize sunlight even in areas that will be shaded later. Best time to plant these bulbs is in the fall, September to November. Good time to target. And always buy good quality bulbs. And in general, this equates to size. Larger bulbs will give a better display in the first flowering season after planting and oftentimes perform better over the life of those bulbs. But you can buy smaller ones, especially if you're buying in quantity and you're going to be naturalizing these, where you need a large number of bulbs. Digging the hole. You can certainly use a bulb planter. In Southwest Missouri, where we have to contend with rocks, oftentimes it's a better option to use a spade or a trowel. I've heard of gardeners using a drill with a bit that has about a 2-inch diameter to open holes. But again, that would really only be practical in a soil that didn't have a lot of rocks. And I've also heard about gardeners protecting their bulbs, particularly valuable bulbs, from rodents. Rodents such as pocket gophers and other soil-living rodents can feed on bulbs. And it can be disheartening to plant the bulbs and then discover that they were devoured during the winter before the next flowering season in the spring. Rule of thumb, plant your bulbs about 2 to 3 times as deep as the bulb is high. And you can see this diagram shows the different planting depths for bulbs. The daffodils tend to be the most deeply planted bulbs, and the others, of course, more shallowly based upon the diameter of the bulb. And always make sure that you plant the bulb in the proper orientation. Generally, the pointy end points up. There are a few bulbs that are a little bit tricky. They don't particularly have pointy ends. So be, again, aware of where the growing point is and where the basal plate, where the roots are going to develop, and plant the bulbs accordingly. It's helpful to supplement fertility at planting. And there's 2 approaches. One is to use a sulfur-coated, slow-release complete fertilizer. And this can be placed in the planting hole and mixed into the soil at the base of the planting hole at a rate of 1 rounded tablespoon per square foot. And the second system is to use bone meal. And again, it's a similar approach where you place 1 tablespoon per square foot, or depending on the analysis of your bone meal, if it's more potent, 1 rounded teaspoon per square foot, and then mix that in to the hole at the base of the bulbs. There is an excellent guide to growing daffodils, which has some information that is applicable to most of the hardy spring flowering bulbs. And I believe that link has been dropped into the chat. Again, just to reinforce that there are horticulture specialists across Missouri. If you have any questions related to fall planting of bulbs, reach out to your local horticulture field specialist.